Hi,
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you too.
Hi, Joan.
Hello, who's Erica?
I'm Erica.
Hello, Erica. How do you do? And
Good. How
others?
are you?
Well, thank you.
Good.
Good.
Hi, Jency.
And this is Thomas Wachunas.
There he is, the man who wrote the raving review.
Oh, great.
Hi, Karen.
Hi,
Trisha.
Erica.
Hi, Anita.
Hi,
We'll just give
Erica.
2 more minutes. Hi, Some of the students. And
How are
see
you?
if- Good. How are you?
Good.
I got to see the
Robin.
show in person, so that was
Oh,
really cool.
nice.
Nice.
So
In California.
what is your review?
Well, I mean, I'm a printmaking nerd, obviously. I'm a printmaker, and that automatically makes us nerds. And it was really cool to see just the amount of like different types of printmaking and artists even using the same, I guess, technique, but in just completely different ways. And I think that made it really cool to see what you can do on a piece of paper, basically. So that was really exciting to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that was some of the comments. Like the range of processes, I think just blew people away. And that was sort of something I wanted to do. I really didn't want to just show one type of thing. Also, considering this was at a school, I wanted to really be able to show students how vast printmaking is. There's so many different things you can do. There's endless possibilities, and I think this show really does that. So we could probably get started. Jack, if you want to kind of start and take us around a little bit.
Okay, could I start with just simply saying thank you to you, Erica, and also to all the artists. And if I don't get a chance to say this show has made a huge positive impact on our students.
Yeah, sure.
So I
Nice.
want to thank everyone. And in particular is how so many of you cross boundaries in your work. So thank you. All right. And
Thank you, Jack.
yeah, we're going to do a little kind of like a little slow movement through here. Okay. And it might make you a little dizzy, but
Oh, but it's so lovely. One of the main things I was thinking about when I was asked to do this show was where it was going to be at, like I was saying, and that it was going to be at a school. And I sort of was thinking, okay, I actually went to Kent State, studied printmaking there, got my master's in printmaking from Kent, and was introduced to sort of the New York printmaking world through Kent by coming on these New York trips. I met Kathy Caraccio, which there's her lovely print right there. And she sort of really helped me kind of come into the print world in New York. And, many of you know me from Manhattan Graphic Center. I got a job there, and that's where I met the majority of you. So when I was asked to do this show, I was thinking several things. One was I was thinking, okay, who am I going to ask? And, where it's going to be. So I wanted it to be really diverse. I didn't want there to be like a theme per se, because artists don't really always work in that manner anyway. You're not really working in a theme, you're working how you work as an individual. And I wanted to sort of highlight that individuality. Obviously, this is a group show, but I really wanted to highlight each artist for their own thing and not sort of put them into a box of, oh, these are people all doing this type of, work or portraits or something like that. Because when I was in school and we'd like go on these New York trips or visit museums or anything like that, you're always looking at these people, right? And someone becomes like your next idol, like, oh, who do I want to like look at now and see what they're doing, and they kind of become your role model when you're in, a student. And I kind of wanted that here. I wanted there to be something for everyone. I wanted students to come to this show or even see it online and sort of find their new idol, like the next person they were going to look up to. And also the fact that obviously all of you are living, working artists, that they could actually talk to you. I encourage students I talked to yesterday to reach out to me or to find you guys on your websites and ask you questions, because some of them are writing papers. And I think that's important. A lot of times there seems this disconnect, you know, like, oh, there's these artists in a museum, but we can't talk to those people, or that person's the curator, but we don't really talk to them. It's like, I really wanted to bring us all together and be able to, you know, have a conversation, and even with the students, you know, talk to them. So as you're seeing, there's such a vast difference of, you know, color and technique, and there's things in this show that are sort of very traditional and then non-traditional. And that's really what I loved about it. There's some beautiful mezzotints in here. And then there's really colorful pieces that are collaged and things like that. And we're coming up to the hanging piece. Taryn's piece is actually a digitally printed piece. So there's just sort of, you know, this huge array of stuff. There's a couple things I wanted to highlight about the show. And then again, there was some questions that had come up from students. So I thought it would be great, I could ask you while you're here. One thing I wanted to highlight was Deanne Prozia and her etchings. And again, you know, being in a school, her etchings are all line etchings. I'm trying to pull up my pull up the website real quick. They're all line etchings. And I feel like when you're a student and you're learning line etching, it's kind of like the lowly process, like, oh, we're just going to learn this line etching so we can transfer an image and get it on the plate. And, you know, people don't really explore it as its like own medium. It's kind of like when you're a student and you learn etching, it's like, no, we're going to throw everything in there, right? It's throw the aquatint in, throw the open bite, throw it all in there. And Deanne just utilizes only line in her work, and that's it. And I think that really just, it just really shows, really highlights that process and shows what you can do with it. And there's no, you know, her tonality is all from the line.
So I'm basically, the reason I do line etching is because when I started in school as a art major, and then I switched out to advertising. Mistake, but whatever. So years later, I was, you know, after college, I was like, I know I want to do something with my art, but you know, what would it be? And I was walking through the mall and they had one of those weekend art shows, and there was a guy and he did line etching. And I just walked right in his booth and I said, this is what I want to do. And he said, okay, I'll teach you. And so he invited me to his studio and I said, okay, perfect stranger, I will come to your studio, which I did for 3 days. and he just kind of taught me everything. I took a ton of notes and I'm very organized, you might notice from the piece. And I went home and the first thing I did was buy a printing press. It was the first thing I did because I thought that's what you needed. So that's what I did. And but then I noticed like other prints, I started being more and more aware of other prints, and I would see aquatint, but I didn't know what an aquatint was. But I was like, well, they must just do something with their line. I mean, how did they get this amazing, you know, texture and value? And so I just started working with line, and I just started doing crosshatch, and I would do like really tight crosshatch, and you know, the amount of time that's in the acid bath and everything. And that's just how it kind of evolved over the years. And you know, now I'll show people, and I know the thing to say is, I don't use any aquatint, and that always gets people to go, really? And then they look more, because you know, I think everybody just assumes that there's aquatint in there.
Yeah,
so,
you can pull up your, if you have it, you can share.
Yeah. So it's just, well, you can see the penny, but yeah, so it's all this little cross hatching that I do, and it takes forever. In fact, the gates, you saw that the whole background, it took about 4 hours. That whole sky took 4 hours. So, and the reason I know this is good, that's the number one question everybody asks, how long does this take you? So, and then you can notice over here, like the Sharpie marker that just Sharpies out any little line or things that are getting overbit or whatever. So So I have that. And then let me just see if I can share one more real quick. I know we have a million things. So this is the piece that I'm working on currently. So it's a 12 by 12. And the things that are lighter right here is things that I just did and I'm going to put in the acid bath. So these darker areas in here, that's all bit already. This is all Sharpie marker, so it'll stay nice and clean. And this little blue point is my 1 point perspective. So all these lines, go to this one point there.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can just every brick, this stupid brick. See this brick? See this here?
It's a brick.
Yeah. See this right here? Just 7 hours to do this little wall. And it's probably like 2.5 inches by 5 or something.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really wanted to, I'm meeting with more students next week, and the students I met with, they're doing a writing assignment. They're not printmakers. So, I wanted to pound into them to get back to their line etching. See, and
Yeah.
so thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, well, don't tell those kids that it takes that long, because they'll never want to do one of them.
Exactly. There was actually some other questions for artists. Robin, someone's actually writing a paper on your series.
They were originally carborundum body prints. So I was using the gel medium on me, making a plate, holograph plate, and then letting that dry. Then I did another plate to get 2 color. And then the third one, this one, is, that was a giclée also, but then I did color on it in the background, different from the other one. And I did colored more in blue green with then overlays with botanicals that I were gelled onto the original. And I did an etching on Tarleton from a different plate that I then hung on top of this and sewed this pink goat head that was dyed in beet juice. And then I ironed it. So there's no gel on the actual piece of fabric because I didn't want it sort of stuck on there, which would have changed. I wanted it to be a veil, a hazy veil. So you couldn't really figure out what was going on exactly. And that would only be accomplished by letting it be somewhat free from the paper behind it and the botanicals. So this was third print. Yeah.
These are beautiful. I did explain to the students that the print on view was a high quality giclée print, but originally it is a colograph and that carborundum body print, so that they knew that. And it actually was a good discussion because we talked a little bit about, hi Katie, we talked about yours too, because we talked about technology and we can't deny it, right? And how it's becoming more acceptable in printmaking today, digitally printing, doing things like giclée. Katie's doing some vinyl prints, and why we're accepting those as prints. So I think it was actually a really good conversation starter. Another question was for Beth Fine. Someone's writing a paper on holly. And I don't know if they're writing a paper. I think they're writing a paper on obviously the artists, but they're picking one specific artwork. And I couldn't really talk too much other than your process and my background as a photographer, but I don't know if there's something, because the students will hopefully watch this afterwards. If there's something you want to say about that print in particular, I'm going to pull it up here.
Well, I have to say this is one of my favorite prints because first of all, it's my best friend who passed away 2 years ago. So I love looking at this print. And this is a photo etching with, I was just writing in the chat, like I live in Berkeley, California, and print at Kala Art Institute. And we don't tend to use giclée. We use archival print or pigment print when it's done digitally. So the Shinkolay here of the map is digital. And then the photo etching is a polymer plate.
The map in the background, that's Shinkolay.
That's Shinkolay, it's
Okay.
Kozo Shinkolay.
Okay.
That I printed on an Epson printer.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, because she had asked me about the map and I said it was Shinkolay, and then I was like, ooh, I hope I'm getting that correct.
It
So,
is Shinkolay. It's
good.
digitally printed or archivally printed or pigment print onto Kozo paper that's then printed as the Shinkolay with the photo etching. So I often do that. I'll combine something that I print digitally, Shinkolay, as Shinkolay, and then it's printed with a printing plate by hand. So it's a
I love
combination.
that. Yeah, I didn't realize that you had printed that digitally. I guess I assumed like it was a physical map, like, oh, maybe you had this map and just used it, but that's really good to know.
It was a physical map that I scanned.
Yeah.
And then
okay.
I didn't want to have, I don't like to use materials that won't hold up. So I know a lot of artists will use maps and newspapers and all kinds of things, but I just don't think they age well. So if I want to use ephemera like that, I will put it onto a piece of Kozo or something from Shinkolay.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing that. I hope forget the girl's name who's writing about you, but I think that'll be a good tip for her. This actually made me think of you, Karen, because I know you're doing a lot of collaging as well. And one of the questions for your pieces, I'm going to scroll back to it. Someone wanted to know
What I was thinking.
what you were thinking. They were interested in knowing, because you had written in your bio or artist statement about your background in architecture.
Mhm.
So they were sort of interested in how that came into play, and then they were fixating on these words, somebody, anybody, nobody, and like how you did that. Did you cut them out with a Cricut? And like that was very specific. So, but you know, if you can answer that, that'll clear that up for her.
Yeah, I think, I'm sort of really entering like guerrilla artwork territory here. There's nothing, specifically printmaking about the things that I do anymore, but it's really becoming an assemblage of things that come together, which was mainly, this really got a push during the lockdown because, you sit in luckily my studio is in my home, so I was surrounded by all my stuff. And then when you start going through your flat files, you kind of realize, holy moly, I have so much stuff. And not everything is good as a print, but most pieces, you all know that as a printmaker, you're producing so much stuff. And I'm really bad at throwing things away. And I always tell my students not to ever throw anything away because you can do something with it. So this piece in particular started as a monotype, an oil monotype in the back. And then I started painting over it and drawing into it. And then I had created a series of vinyl mats that I printed for a separate project. And this particular one, that's that cloud that's sitting on top, or the thought bubble, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the ghost print, but it was too ethereal in and of itself to stand up to do anything with. So I decided to cut it out. So first I printed it and then I cut it out of the BFK paper with all the holes in it. And in the middle, you can sort of see, I left the center standing so you get a sense of the ghost print. And then it needed something else. And, where the architecture comes in for me is, how do you put things together? Because I don't, unless it's Shinkolay or some elegant way of gluing something to something else, which to me Shinkolay is, I always try and think about things, how to put to put the pieces together in an elegant, creative way without using just glue. So that's where the twist ties come in this piece, because the print was a piece of BFK that I cut out. That's the irregular shape, and then superimposed it on another 22 by 30 piece of blank BFK. And the way it's held into place is by those 4 twist ties. So nothing is sacred anymore. I burn it, I punch it, I make holes into it, I tie it back together. I allow myself to do a lot of things with it that pure printmaking, quote unquote, wouldn't allow you to do. And I really have to, like, you know, Nandini is here, and I have to hand it to her that she really kind of started pushing me in that direction with her beyond the print. You know, where do you take things beyond the print? So there is that whole architectural aspect of putting things together in an interesting way, but then there's also always those things that go through our heads. So once I had that bubble superimposed on the piece, I had these words used in some other mixed media piece that I did. And, you know, it was the middle of the lockdown. So, you know, you sit there and you think, it's like, well, is there somebody, anybody, nobody out there? And that's why I called it Fleeting Thoughts, because, you know, of the ethereal nature of it, of the temporal nature of it, because, you know, in a way this thing has come together, but I might as well easily take it apart again, because it's not, it is and it isn't permanently fixed. So I hope that wasn't
no, yeah, absolutely. And I think I actually did you justice, because when she brought up the architecture and printmaking, I'm like, well, okay, printmaking in and of itself, you're always like sort of breaking something apart and then putting it back together. Right. And I kind of refer to your, you know, to the building of the image. I'm like, this isn't necessarily all made at one time. And like, she might print something, cut something up, come back to it, paint on it, draw on it, whatever, you know. It's all about sort of how do you build this.
I also always felt from the beginning, there was a reason, I think, why I was always drawn to printmaking. And once I hit the press, I really realized that this is my medium. Because it's easy, you know, I think I notice with teaching it to people that sometimes it's really hard for people to wrap their minds around the process of printmaking, because it's not a direct process. It's a process that it's backwards and forwards, and what comes first and what comes next. If you layer your colors, you have to think about it. And I think the reason why it comes naturally to me, because I always looked at it as kind of making floor plans. Yeah. You know, you have to be able to think from the top to the bottom and how things connect and what ties it all together. And even in a flat piece, I think in a way I go about it like that. So, and it is always the horizontal and the vertical and the composition of it all. So you can take, you know, you can take a woman out of architecture, but you can't take architecture out of the printmaker.
I love that one. That's very good. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Erica.
Absolutely. I'm going to reshare my screen again with Nandini's piece. I know, Nandini, you can't stay too long, but some student is writing about you, and they're going to be writing about this piece. Mm-hmm. And so anything you could tell us about this piece would be helpful to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. And thank you so much, Erica.
Yeah,
really love the show. And thank you, Karen, for mentioning me. It's all of your own imagination and hard work that's brought you where you are. So I was just a little, you know, igniter, I guess. Regarding this piece.
First domino piece. Somebody has to kick the dominoes over.
Thank you. This was originally from a 9 by 9 inch piece etching plate, hard ground etching. And what I did was print it on Japanese paper, but print it over and over again with my experimental printing techniques. So if you want to go closer up, there are lighter prints and then darker prints and overlays.
Yeah, you can kind of see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Originally, the whole plate is just one tone, but because there are almost 20 to 30 impressions of the plate in this, yeah, you see where how all the lines, there are multiples of lines in the stem area. So originally in the plate, there's just a few lines, but I kept, folding the paper over and printing it over and over and over again to create those multiples of lines. And that becomes possible. Yeah, it's something wonderful that happens with Japanese paper. And because it prints on both sides, it also bleeds through. So when you fold it over, it reprints, from the print, plus it prints from the bleeding. So there's a lot of things which happen. And so I used very thin Japanese paper here. And the lines that you can see in the middle are actually folds. Of course, they are flattened now, but they are originally folds.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. So this is just so one plate with less flowers, less stems, and you ran it through, you said 20 sometimes.
Yes, but not on the same piece of paper, on various pieces of Japanese paper.
I see.
Some on the same
folding
piece of paper, folding it and all that. And so, yeah, so the whole thing became like there were many prints, and then I actually cut them and then composed them and glued them together. So some of the lines are also the glue lines, and some glue lines you can't see because they become very seamless with the paper, but some you can see. So that's how the whole thing was put together. And then on top of that, I worked with red ink, like 2-3 different types of pens. So I used a dip pen, I used micron pens, and I used another like couple of pens that I found in places to go over and bring out some of the flowers and work with them on with pen. So that's why some of the flowers are little buds, let's say, are a little darker. So I did that. And then the whole thing, it had several pieces of paper. So I glued the whole thing on top of a thicker Tiepolo paper.
Yeah.
So you can see that in the background.
Yes, I can see how it's glued on. I love knowing that, as printmakers, we're so much about the process, like how something is done makes it like, now that I know, oh, this was run through all these times and you're folding it, printing front and back and, going into it hand, I can just see that happening. And
yeah, it's a really fun process, and mounting it on the white paper actually kind of illuminates it from the back and gives it more contrast. So you actually see a lot more once it's glued, like once it becomes one with the thick paper. So that's another reason to mount. It also gets body and heft, but it also becomes much more visible.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that.
Most welcome.
That's so good. And if any of you guys have any questions for me, I'm just kind of going around. I'd love to hear from everyone, but please just chime in. So let me see. How about Veronica? There was a piece that someone had asked about. Oh, it was this piece here. If you want to go into maybe a little more detail about it.
Well, I think this relates to something that was brought up earlier, which is things in the flat files that aren't quite, finished, but that you pull out again later. I certainly have a ton of things in my flat files, which are almost just like a background, or, as you're printing, you pull a test proof or you're monotyping and you get a ghost and you're like, I'll do something with this eventually. And the background image, kind of the figures, are on a wood block, and they were part of a series that I did while I was in New York. I am based out of Austin, Texas. That's where I'm joining y'all from. And I kind of bluffed my way into something that was reserved for New York artists. Actually, Christy Valentine, I feel like you might have been in that same
she was
with me. Yeah. I remember at that meeting together. So I carved those blocks for this specific thing. And then while I was printing, and I was printing at Manhattan Graphics Center, I was just like pulling random stuff and then brought a bunch of paper home with me. And when I was working on the next series, I was doing humongous prints, things that were, I think they were about 10 feet long by 4 feet across on this kind of banner fabric. But there were lots of little moments within them. So when we would pull back the banner fabric, I'd go through with I would just randomly in the moment at the print shop, pull out smaller pieces of paper from my flat files and put them all over the place to catch the ghosts. And so this was just like a throwaway print, not a throwaway print, but like a not serious test print from a woodblock that I printed in New York that then 2 years later got a layer of a ghost on it in Texas, and that I never showed. I never was entirely sure if it was complete, but the fact that Erica was looking for things unframed for this had me pull out a lot of stuff that I wasn't sure if it was complete. And when Eric and I did our virtual studio visit, I was like, I don't know, I just pulled this out. It was just something, maybe it's done, maybe it's not. And Erica, you dug it. And I said, all right, so then it's done.
Yeah, now someone wants to write about it. I think that background gives that really atmospheric, it's like, oh, what's on top of what? And kind of like, you know, they're not sure how it's made, right? And that's when they, what sort of, I think, drawing them in, like, how is this made? And, you know, then they just go down the rabbit hole.
And I worked for almost 20 years as a master printer, so primarily printing for other artists. And in my own work, I always wanted to try to get as many colors and as many processes on the sheet of paper as possible. Like, I wanted my work to be work that other people couldn't afford to pay me to make for them. You know, just the most height of technical, like, look what I can do, mother effers kind of stuff. Because artists who pay that, they pay per run, they pay for how big it is, you know? So I was always pushing myself to make it really, really complicated. This particular piece is not one of those complicated pieces, but it does come out of that, like, not having a barrier between processes, you know, like just throwing as much on a single sheet of paper as you can. And there is a completed monotype from that totemic series in the show as well. So there's that contrast between the intentionality of one piece and the sort of randomness of the other. You can kind of faintly see the same figures in the background on this one.
Yeah, and this is another artist as well, so it's a collaboration. So it's not all your imagery, but
although that one's mostly mine. The other artist, I think his name was Keith's stuff, is very light in there.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. This is a fantastic show, y'all. I'm so glad to be in concert with all of these powerful women printmakers. I feel like this show should travel. Who has an art center that we can put it in a box and ship it to?
I'm gonna pull up one of Joan's prints, which I just absolutely love this. This is an etching with spit bite and dry point. Joan, if you want to say a little something about this. I don't know why I kept thinking it was a woodcut. My brain kept going to woodcut for some reason.
Well, there was some, we weren't sure. I had a different title. Anyway, that kind of clerical mistake came up in this show. What was that called?
Yeah.
A long time ago. But I use multiple plates and overlay them. And I typically or frequently work in a square format to make that easier to do. And I mean, I'm noticing that a lot of the people whose prints I'm seeing have rescued portions of it from another iteration. So I think this, the spit bite on this was done earlier than the dry point overlay. And these are all unique. So yeah, so that's, sometimes I've just done a 4-plate color etching with help, and I sure needed that help. So this is sort of another way to do it.
I love these, like these light tones in the background
Yes.
that you're getting with, that's what you're getting with the spit bite.
Exactly.
It's so lovely. I mean, it could be a monotype, it could be, so I that's again, us printmakers love that when you're like, how exactly was that made? And how did you get those sort of like very...
The blue-green plate was all rosined edge to edge. And then the blue-green is painted spit bite.
So how many plates was this?
I think that this is a blue plate, a green plate, and I think that the black lines and the orange lines were on one plate together, and I could ink them all a poupée.
Yeah,
I'm
wow.
sure that's the way I did it.
I love it.
Thank you very much.
Love it. And, you know, just to think like someone might look at this and be like, oh, that's a fairly simple image. But when you break, right? But when you break it apart like that and you know the process, you're like, wow, it's so much more involved than you would have thought. And, but again, I think it shows like, you know, these processes, like, you know, you're not overdoing it with line etching. You're not overdoing it. It's very subtle, but when you build that up, it just creates this really interesting composition altogether.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I say
yes.
something about that piece? It so reminds me of like the cave paintings or something. There's something so I don't know, like interesting. Like I feel like I want to read something into it. Like what's going on? It looks like a hunting scene in a way, or there's something that is so fascinating, and it just reminds me of those old.
I love that comment. Thank you.
I love that too. I know, because I went to Joan's website and a lot of things I picked out, not everything, and I was drawn to this one like right away, and I can totally see the cave thing. That's funny.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, I do now.
I love the sense of scale in it. Like I'm kind of perplexed. It could be a map. Like it has such a, it's kind of mysterious to me, the sense of scale. It's full of wonder.
Oh, neat. Well, the group of prints that this belongs to were, I was working with the idea of the surfaces of water and weather and yeah, mostly water. But then if something, I don't hold back if I wanted to add line, the line doesn't speak to the green and blue so directly, does it?
I'll say that I don't know if you guys have seen like the ceramic vases with like horsehair and like marbled pieces. It's very reminiscent of that.
Interesting.
But it also almost has like an encaustic feel to it. You know, it's like I can feel the layers of it. It's like the pieces are floating in space.
Yeah, it's really lovely. Thank you so much, Joan.
Thank you for letting people comment. That was
yeah,
really nice. That was really nice. Thank you.
Absolutely. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. How are
Good.
you?
I'm gonna pull up one of your lovely woodcuts. Now, I know you for your the reduction woodcuts that are like of the forest or of trees and
sure.
So I mean, this is definitely, you can tell this is definitely your work, different from what I normally see from you. I don't know if these are newer or older, or I guess
this is a few years old, but I'm doing more and more of the architectural type images now. So I've been concentrating on woodcuts and reduction woodcuts. Two of the ones in the exhibition are using two blocks. So I used one block for most of the colors and one block for the grays and blacks on this particular one. And there's usually 10 to 20 colors. I think there's 20 colors in this print.
So it's a reduction.
But I do a lot of, I use a lot of stencils. So I don't ink up the whole plate with every color a lot. You know, so like the reds will just be just little stencils in that. So.
Oh, nice. So you're using multiple blocks and you're doing reduction woodcut.
Yes.
Wow.
But, you know, if you use two, or I've used 3 blocks, sometimes you get just a huge range of colors by overlapping all your plates. So
I need to introduce you to Jency. She is also working in woodcut and doing multiple blocks and doing reduction. And so I think this is your new idol, Jency, because Cynthia is like I tried to get Cynthia to teach at MGC. I was like, Cynthia, we need you to teach reduction woodcut. I don't think, I forget, I don't think you lived in the area or something.
No, I was in Philly and now I'm even further because I'm in Portugal. So,
Oh,
Nice.
yeah, yeah.
it is just, I love your work. It is such a great example of the reduction woodcut, woodcut. I feel like it's sort of, you're not seeing as much reduction woodcut anymore. It's a very tedious process. It's very time consuming, a lot of planning and mapping out. And
it is, but I sold my press when I moved and I will buy another press, but I haven't yet. And woodcut, as long as you're using a Japanese paper or a fairly lightweight paper, it's easy to hand print it. So
right.
You don't, I mean, it's limiting because that's really the only thing I can do without a press, but it is, I like the results of actually hand printing.
Yeah, when I was in school, my professor, he made us hand print everything. Once we could hand print, then we were allowed to use the press.
Wow.
He was, make us work for it. So that's really good. Thank you so much for being a part of the exhibition and for sharing with us.
Very exciting exhibition.
So we'll show Jency's then. Now, Jency's, someone was interested in talking about one of the pieces, and it's this one, which is not reduction woodcut, but it's a woodcut, I believe, and then hand coloring.
Oh, wow.
And you can, go into more detail. I kind of told her that you're working in, I'm like, she's working in multiple processes. So she's doing, this is woodcut and it's hand coloring, but she'll also do embroidery. I'm like, now she's doing multiple wood blocks and reduction wood blocks. So I took this as maybe one of the first ones because it was hand colored, and maybe that's not correct, but.
Yeah, so this is one of my so I was creating a coloring book, and then when the pandemic hit, I was just like, all right, I guess this is not happening anymore. So I figured I'll just start carving and hand pulling everything, and then I started to dabble into watercolor. And I was like, you know what, let's put it over my prints and see what happens. And now it's kind of turned into a practice of I will watercolor something first before I create it into a reduction print. Or I'll watercolor onto fabric and embroider on top of that as well with my prints. But yeah, it's been very interesting. I'm kind of all over the place. I don't have a preferred choice, but reduction print has been a big favorite of mine. And the one thing I like about putting watercolor on top of it, I feel with my reduction prints, since I do about 17 to 20 layers, if not more, the watercolor lets me make the colors as bright as I want it to be. And I also get that gold metallic color that I want in all of my pieces the way I want it to come out. So yeah, if you go to my favorite is my bad bitches only. And this is another one that I've done. This is probably my favorite that I did during the pandemic. No press. This is all hand pulled.
And this is reduction.
And this is reduction. It's 17 layers.
Wow.
The techniques were with my hand and my feet.
Maybe you're Cynthia's new idol then.
So I was stepping onto the piece and just doing what I could, because I also didn't have Japanese paper. All I had was BFK Reeves at home, and all the Japanese paper that I had, it was still in Japan and hadn't shipped yet. And they were like, it's a 6-month wait. So I was like, all right, I guess we're gonna muscle this one out.
I'm gonna try it.
So just as a background, I love, I'm an epidemiologist as well. I've been a data analyst for the city. And so I like to put a lot of science into my work. And I love putting amino acids into my work, and amino acids all have like letters to each other. So like I can spell out different messages that no one else but a person who knows their amino acids would know. So every one of my pieces always have a little bit of science in them. And then I also love to bring my heritage in. One thing growing up, colorism is a real thing in my culture, and just being constantly told, don't go out in the sun, don't do this, don't do that, oh, you're too dark, or things like that. So I just wanted to kind of bring that into the forefront, saying like our melanin is beautiful regardless of the tone. And I just want to bring more people of color towards the front and just give them the platform to be shown off as beautiful and not being hindered in how they look. So yeah, that's all my stuff. And I am like loving this reduction. And Cynthia, I'm gonna have to pick your brain about these these reductions, because I'm always wanting to learn more. So
I know, I think I mentioned you to her one time at MGC. I was like, oh, there was this woman, Cynthia, but she doesn't live here. And she, like, there's only so much I know about the reduction, and then you really need someone who has the experience with it. But again, that's also part of this. I really hope that some of you make other connections, because you are sort of working in similar ways. Or something I told the students is, all of us are the printmaking community. It's, yes, we're all different. We're all working in different ways and doing all these different things. But some of you, I know, work in the same studio. So you're literally like, they're, part of, your community, and you should know each other. Speaking of, Trisha's sort of working in a similar way with, well, Trisha, you should, I don't want to say heritage, but you're an epidemiologist. She kind of comes from this like art and medicine background. So you guys are kind of combining these similar things. Now this print is a little different than what I'm talking about, but Trisha is about to do a solo show called Neurodiversity, Biodiversity. You'll have to check that out. But Trisha, how are you? I digress.
Oh, I'm good.
Good. Talk about
yes.
this piece a little bit.
Sure, yeah. So I started off, actually, when I first learned, I was in woodblock, and then I found collagraph, I don't know, midway through my bachelor's degree. This is a while back. And so since then, I've been doing a lot of stuff with just cut paper. And so this piece actually has a little bit of the Mumbai skyline and the bridge, the GW bridge that I live next to. So it's both places that I've lived in. And then I have some hand marbled paper and a couple, like a different plate on the top. So that was just sort of, it's all done actually just with cut paper that is then made into a block. So it's kind of actually, I kind of started doing that a lot because stencils are a great way to make monotype happen. And then from there, collagraphing a stencil is a pretty natural thing. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, so like this work is from the previous series, and the newer work that I'm doing is actually, the reason I'll talk about that for a second is because it is a little bit more about, it's interesting. I think that a lot of people have a biological sort of micro macro theme in this. Like I know Lauren does, and the last couple of people that we talked to did a little bit too. So, I just really wanted to say that I loved seeing kind of that focus. So I went to actually medical school and I was working in mental health. And so a lot of my newer work has a lot to do with depictions of women who have been previously held in mental institutions. So that's kind of what I'm working on now. But for me, a lot of the things that are kind of unique, and some of the stuff that I started doing in these prints was that I started making a lot of my own color using a split lake dye pigment process. So I was essentially taking the water-based process that we use on fabric, because I teach Indian woodblock. And I was taking that process and then making small batches, using a lake dye process where I precipitate out the color and then grind that color. And so I was kind of getting some of my own blues and indigos. So this has a little bit of that indigo color in it. And so that process is something that is kind of interesting because I thought it relates a little bit to the way that people are talking a little bit about water and their expectations and feelings about it, and how the idea of like, you know, a process can sort of permeate through a piece in a different way. And sort of on an aside, I also have been around a lot about, you know, be out of the sun, stay out of color. It's like the whole idea of, you know, working as a woodblocker as well is kind of like not considered the most glamorous. So there's parts of me that kind of really enjoy sort of reviving this sort of thing that was in my ancestry as well, because my family used to do a lot of traditional Indian woodblock printing before before they all became, I think, pretty much accountants and some doctors. So part of like those discoveries that I made for this work, and the way that I started handling color, and the way that I started handling the process of, you know, how could I make something that has a woodblock like feel but isn't as well, are things that I brought into the newer work. And for me, actually, like I use blue a lot now as a depiction of divinity, much as Hinduism does for, like, you know, our gods. So, and also for darkness, because it represents, I think, black really in what we know. So for me, this indigo color is kind of, that's in this piece, is also really important because it's becoming a important stand-in to mean other things. So.
Thank you, Trisha. And I forgot for a second that so much of your work is holograph. If you go to Trisha's website, there is so much stuff on there that I think is like photographic or this, and then I find out it's holograph. And so I feel like you're using it in a way that you don't see as often. Like, I wouldn't look at this and immediately think holograph. Me personally, I'm sure Robin has seen all the holographs, but I thought that was so intriguing how you're using that process, and it's really beautiful.
I was also just shocked at how little depth a holograph can get if you use loose enough ink and you're wiping it carefully. Then, so like, I mean, sometimes I've got things that are as thin as like a printer sheet of paper, and that still makes a little bit of a difference. So, I mean, I just started working with a sewing machine as well, and a bunch of other different things that make marks, and the slightest difference actually works. And that's kind of counter to woodblock, because woodblock, you really gotta work to make your lines. Like, you know, even your fine lines, you have to be careful not to let them get too big, you know? So it's kind of the opposite, because it's like the slightest thing gives you a lot. So it's fun.
That's so good. Thank you so much, Trisha. Katie Commodore, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. It's so good to see you. It's been a while.
I miss everybody.
I know. We miss you too. Thank you so much for being a part of this show. There was some questions on this piece the other day. And I think for me, this is the vinyl print, correct?
It's a vinyl cut.
Vinyl cut.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what I was telling them is, you know, because we were talking about a vinyl cut and is that printmaking, and I was talking about my experience at some of the print fairs in New York, seeing things that I'm like, why is there a wooden frame? What is this wooden frame? But they're justifying it because it's an addition. It can be additioned, and this is what makes it a print. And so when I saw these, I was just in love with them, and I'm like, they can be additioned, we're taking it. But again, it's that use of technology, right? And how it's sort of changing print. And so I also wanted to show, you know, the trajectory of where printmaking is going. It's always going to have its traditional roots, but technology is always going to, you know, do something for us. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about this print, the process.
Sure. I mean, the process isn't that exciting. I think what's more exciting is this idea of what makes it a print. And I basically hacked a silhouette vinyl cutter, which is a craft vinyl cutter.
Like a Cricut thing?
It's a Cricut, but a little bigger.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, a Cricut. I hacked a Cricut. And and which is right, it's geared towards scrapbookers, and
yeah,
you know, it's only supposed to be able to cut like, you know, an arabesque arc on your Christmas labels and stuff like that. And basically I forced it to do stuff it doesn't want to do. And because, you know, that's how I roll.
Yeah, I love it.
But it's a printer. It's a printer, just instead of an ink cartridge, it has a blade. And so you send an image to it and it cuts it out, and that makes it a print. I could print 1,000 of them, or
Yeah.
I can print 5, because at the end of the day, you then have to go in and pick out all of the white space. You got to pick out all of the extra vinyl,
Right.
and transfer it onto paper. But it is a print. It's might not be a fine art print, but it's more high tech than a glacé print if it's just a straight glacé print. You know what I mean? I'm not nothing against glacé prints, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I don't hear what you're saying. Yeah.
I got into printmaking because of its ability to reach the masses, and its as a historic medium, its role in changing history and convincing people to join wars or join political movements, or, you know, buy this, go to this circus, do that sort of stuff. And the accessibility of printmaking has always been really important to me. And so this seemed to be a new way to make something even more accessible, because all I have to do is send it and it cuts it out for me.
Really interesting. I really love that. I mean, but you're also a very skilled printmaker. This is another one of Katie's. So it's not like you don't have the skill. I mean, you do etching, you do silk screen, you're doing color, like, you know, photo. So you're definitely a skilled printmaker. You know, I didn't want anyone to
I mean, this one, I have a master printer who actually printed it. Also happens to be a woman, but like, I am not as skilled at a I fake my printmaking a lot. Like, I look like I know what I'm doing, but I'm winging it. Like, I'm pretending I know what I'm doing, and then I'm just like, it'll work out in the end. It'll be fine.
I think your one thing though is your message. I think your message is so important right now, honestly, with, you know, everything that's going on in the world with conversations about sexuality and what that means. And I feel like your work is just so accepting of the human body, whatever body it is. And I really love that. I'm drawn to that. I don't, you know, some people I know are really, they really look at the subject matter of things. And I don't let the subject matter sort of offend me or dictate something. You know what I mean? I really want to like look at it as a story. And I think I told you this first piece, I was so sorry about my scrolling. I was so drawn to the color and the form and the skill of the screen print. I didn't even see the subject matter at first. It took me a minute because I'm like, this pattern, this color, this is just amazing. And I just am absolutely obsessed with this print, and it's so clean and beautiful.
That's a 3-color screen print.
3 color, that's it?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah,
I guess I could have went in and counted, but
it's red, that like mint green, and then the kind of cobalty blue.
Yeah. Wow. I think it's so bold, you know, the pose and the color, but you know, there's other artists in here too, like Jency's working in a lot of different ways. You're also working in a lot of different ways. You're doing embroidering, and I know you do like book illustrations and screen printing and vinyl cutting. You know, you're not just, there's not just one way. It's kind of like any way that works for your expression is what you do. And I like that.
Yeah, whatever is the means to the end. Like, you know, I'm game, you know, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
If this medium's gonna work the best, count me in. If this one's gonna work the best, I'm going for it. But,
yeah. I encourage the girl to look at your website. I'm like, you got to look at her embroidery stuff.
That's what I'm working on right now. Like,
I love it.
I keep looking down at is me stitching. I'm stitching on pearls.
Oh, wow. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Katie.
Thanks for including me. It's amazing.
Yeah.
The show is so good. I know everybody keeps saying it, but it's true. Like,
I know, I agree. I wish I could talk about every single print because I honestly have an affinity. Like for every single print, I'm like, there's something that I just absolutely love. And, you know, obviously we don't have all that time, but there's a couple more people, just a few more. I would love to just get to Jane. How are you? Now Jane you have so many different prints that are very different. Mezzotints and then color etchings. And I wish I could talk, you know, at length about it, but I'm just going to pull up this one because someone wants to write about this piece.
Oh, really?
And I think they were just so intrigued by how it was made and, you know, your process. And again, color etchings, you know, people, it's hard to come by, I think.
Yeah, this is one of, I haven't done a whole lot of them, and I kind of am concentrating now on mezzotint. But this one was, you know, pretty traditional, a 3-plate composition. And I wanted to play with the figure ground, just like a flat field of red as much as I could, and then juxtapose the tulips in a vase against the fabric in the background with the floral pattern on it. And so it's basically a red plate, a yellow plate, and a blue plate, which depending on the order that you print them in, you know, dictates what colors come out. So to try to get that red really, really clean and bright, I had to print that plate last over the other two. First the blue, then the yellow, and also trying not to lift off the yellow in the pattern behind it. So it was mostly kind of dealing with it almost like a landscape, I think. I do that a lot with my still lifes. I'm very much a traditionalist.
I love it.
Yeah, I work mostly, this is aqua tints with soft ground. And the lace at the bottom was just the stop out on the red aqua tinted plate to create the lace pattern. So yeah, just trying to see if I could pull that off just with the bright red and still make those tulips feel like they're popping out of the background, and being very minimalist about it.
I love the color. I love that the backgrounds, I mean, it made me think of, is it Van Gogh? That's like the highest compliment, right? But there's one picture I'm thinking about where it's like all red wall and then the all red table.
Matisse, I think.
Oh, Matisse, I think you're right.
Yeah, he did
There's also Van Gogh's bedroom that was the red.
Oh,
yeah, it's one of those I'm thinking of, but
yeah.
And I know
all
that
those,
these, oh, sorry,
all those guys I'm influenced by just their ease of creating objects with you know, with just the clean lines and the simplicity that they do. And so yeah, just kind of taking a myriad of different influences, you know. Then there's also there's a couple of women who do still life in real bright colors. Is it Freckleton and Janet Fish, I think is another one.
Yeah, we talked about that because this was another color etching, and I thought of Janet Fish, and I know that these were a little bit older pieces. And I remember, I think it was you were like, "Oh, I'm kind of surprised you picked those because they're kind of old, and I'm not really working that way anymore." But
yeah,
again, I was really thinking about this being at a school and like what amazing examples of color etchings these were.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I kind of got sidetracked on mezzotint because those started getting into print exhibitions and that, and there's quite a few mezzotint specific shows and around the world that I've been getting into. So I have another one that a 3-plate color etching that I've been working on, but I kind of hit a wall with it, so I put it away, and I do need to get back to it. Yeah, and this is another one with just the simple 3 plates, red, blue, and yellow, you know, and just seeing how many colors I can get out of doing that, and just soft ground and just a few aqua tints on this one. It was mostly, I really like litho, but it doesn't like me. You know, everything. I took litho in college, and it was like the thumbprint you put on the corner of the piece would come out really beautifully, and all the stuff you worked really hard to get, none of that would show up. So so the water and oil thing just doesn't work with me. I
Yeah.
have to be much more direct.
I think you found your medium, you know, your etching and mezzotints are so good. Like you've got the skill there. You don't need to go to litho.
You can do so much with etching. It can look like just about anything. And so, yeah, so this was just a basic drawing, and then using the little bit of aqua tint to reinforce what I had going there.
Yeah, they're so great.
Oh, thank you.
She also has just quickly, there's this, oops, I lost it, sorry. Just to show the difference. Oh, so this is another one of Jane. So, you know, I feel like this is sort of totally opposite, this beautiful dark mezzotint, and this was really telling a story. It's not, I guess it's still a still life, but
yeah, I'm trying to I'm trying to break out of just the traditional still lifes. Most of mine tell stories. They have a lot of symbolism in it. And this one, it started out with the image in the bottom right, the lone crab who is the collector of the crabs. And then I did the bigger version on the top, which that one alone is called Convergence, because they're these crabs that are rounding up the marbles. And then I had always intended this to end up being a triptych, and I came up with the crow in the bottom left, as you know, so the entire piece is called The Intruder, because it's, you know, everybody is going after these little gems of glass, and the crow is eyeing up this one. And so it kind of gives a bigger narrative to what everybody is doing in this one. And you can't take it realistically, because if you notice, if you know anything about crabs, what you're seeing in these is the underside of a crab. It's this milky white, which worked really well with the glass, and then these ominous shadows that you can get with mezzotint, just using that the values and that. So I just was really attracted to it, and just to see if I could come up with just a composition that would tell a story and go beyond just what you're seeing. So
I loved the story, and you were like, oh, I tried to enter it and someone didn't like the crabs, and I'm like, we'll take the crabs. I love the crabs. And
yeah, people are very definite about their subject matter, and it's just like
but and again, you know, the way we hung it in the gallery, it wasn't necessarily everybody together. Some people got split up, and you were kind of in two areas, because it was kind of like, oh, there's these black and white things and then these color things. So I thought that was kind of interesting about you, where I had you in like two different zones, because
yeah, I noticed that when I watched the walkthrough, and I thought that was interesting. I wonder how many people would connect the same artist as doing all these pieces.
Oh, they're like studying it over there, which is great, like reading the names. And so
great.
So that's really good. Thank you for sharing that story.
Thank you for having me.
So I think we just have two more people. Of course, the best for last, right? Anita Hunt. I was first introduced to Anita from a show she entered at when I was working at Manhattan Graphic Center. And it was similar. It was something like this pile of sticks, and that's sort of what I've known her for. And I was just blown away by the process, about the detail. And, you know, when I was asked to this show, I was like, I gotta have one of those. So I'm so happy to have this one in here. I mean, all of them, but I just absolutely love these stick piles. they just really speak to me. So I don't know if you want to go into depth a little bit about it.
Well, thank you, Erica. I'm so thrilled to be here, and I'm so enjoying hearing about everyone's process, because we all know you do this for a while and it just goes off in so many different directions, and oftentimes you just can't imagine how you got there doing these things that you end up doing obsessively. The stick piles started probably, I don't know, 15 years ago at least. I got obsessed with beaver dams. I live in a rural area, and there are these amazing constructions that the beavers make. And I started taking a lot of photographs and finding these little compositions within these incredible structures. And so it's just turned into a pretty large ongoing series that's morphed in a bunch of ways. This particular piece is actually not from a beaver dam. It's another related stick thing. My partner does a lot of brush clearing and makes these incredible stick piles, which I photograph because they really are these amazing sculptures that are, you know, ephemeral because they end up being burned with the land clearing process. And so between the beaver dams and the stick piles, it's, you know, I feel like I could just do this for another 4 or 5 lifetimes probably. They started off as dry points. I was working exclusively in dry points for a long time. I'm chemically sensitive, and so when I started working with addition to print processes, I started off with litho initially, and I had to quit all of that. I did traditional etching because I became really sensitive to all the acids and the solvents. And for the longest time, I just did monotypes and collagraphs and things with water-based inks. But I really missed working with metal plates. And so I initially went back to working on copper, just doing dry point. And so the early stick piles and the beaver dams are all dry points. And then at some point into it, I started working at ZMA's Printmaking in Northampton, Massachusetts. And the focus of the studio is all less toxic and non-toxic materials. And so I began experimenting with the new acrylic-based grounds. And this piece is made with the big etching ground, which is it's an ink-based ground that then etches in ferric. And it took a really long time to get the hang of it. It was a very big learning curve, switching from traditional materials to the less toxic materials. But I feel like that in the last few years, I really was able to get what I was going for with these materials.
Yeah, I think you've mastered it. I'm gonna show quickly, there's a monotype of a beaver dam, and it's like, you know, similar but so different. I sort of love seeing the different medium, because from what I had seen of you, it was these etchings and they're lovely. And then I see this monotype and I'm like, oh, wow, I hadn't seen that. Well, and I don't know if I would have thought it was a monotype right away.
Well, you know, I think obviously if you see it on the wall next to the etchings, you can see that it's a monotype. It's, you know, it doesn't have the fidelity of the etchings, but yeah. But these, you know, all these reductive monotype images were, you know, they were my medium for many years when I was trying to figure out how to move forward with less toxic materials. You know, the reductive process, I don't know. I sunk pretty far into it, and there's a lot of these. I still own a lot of them.
Yeah, I know this was a little bit older work, but I just really loved seeing that trajectory of your work and sort of changing the processes, and love that you've moved into the non-toxic realm, because I think that's a direction that, you know, a lot of print shops are going. They're, you know, if they haven't gone that way already, they're trying to incorporate that. So I think it's great that you've, you know, you've sort of mastered it. You're like ahead of the curve with that. And I think that's very, I got to remember that, interesting, because, you know, there's going to be a lot of questions, I think, about people who are trying to switch and how that happens. And like you said, you've worked on it for a long time, and, you know, it's like reteaching yourself, right?
I'm happy to field any questions.
Okay,
you know, I did teach at ZMAs for many years, and so a lot of different processes. So yeah, I'm happy to talk to the students. So feel free to, you know, encourage them if they want to.
Yes, I encourage them to reach out. I feel like they're probably shy and they probably won't, but I really hope they do, because, you know, this is a time for that, right? This is you guys are all here, right? Talk to us now.
Anita, did you find that once your partners knew that you were incorporating the stick piles into your work, did your partners start to make more interesting stick piles?
I'm not sure it was a direct feedback thing so much. I think that it's just what he does. And and you know, some of them were, you know, some of the ones that I've been using as models in particular, really, you know, I was so sorry to see them go.
Aww. Well, this one here is a totally different kind of, this is called Groundscape, which, you know, Anita's is kind of like a groundscape. This is totally different, by Christy. And actually, I'm the lovely owner of this piece now.
Oh, wow.
Woo-hoo! And this is a Mochilito, right, Christy? This one is? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I think I wanted you to talk about, if you can, the Mochilito process a little bit, because it's something not everyone knows. And I think you just did such a stunning job on this and with that process.
Thank you. Well, I'm so honored to be in such good company. The process of Mochilito is basically a litho on wood. And I also tried to learn lithography and quickly learned that I was going to try something else on aluminum plates. But this process is just done on birch plywood. And you can see in the right section of the print, yeah, there's carve marks. So one of the benefits of making a Mochilito is that you're drawing on the wood block and you can pull out the wood grain by sanding it. And then you can also carve. So you can, it's one of the few, like you can't carve on a wood block and draw together, you know, from a regular woodcut. So this process allows you to draw on the wood and create a grease loving mark, and then also carve at the same time.
So it's kind of like you're doing a litho and a woodcut at one time.
Correct. Right. And so the subject matter here was just the ground. I felt like I was also one of those artists, and I love those stick piles we were just looking at, because I feel like I would search for subject matter around me, and then I kind of get you to surrender, and I'm like, the art that I want to make, it's like right underneath my feet, you know. So I started looking at surfaces of the ground and the streets in New York, and this kind of came from, and then I also felt like it's really just about making marks that mimic that texture that I found on the ground. So found kind of a happy medium with this technique where I could do that. And the top section on the right side has a lot of, like, I was using a Dremel tool. And
yeah, that's carved. I can see where it's kind of like stipply looking.
Yeah. yeah, so these were fun because they're visceral to me, like, you know, the texture feels physical as well as drawing.
No,
yeah, having some injuries from the Dremel tool, so I'm on a hiatus. We could talk about all our printmaking injuries. I've had a few.
This is basically non-toxic though too, right? The Mocha-Lido.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, except for the cleanup.
Right. But I just love that, you know, that I feel like that process is sort of very niche, and you hear about it, you know. We were lucky when, you know, at MGC we had Ava Budka, who was sort of the Mocha-Lido queen, come and teach it. But other than that, I hadn't really heard about it. You know, it wasn't really a thing. So it's very interesting. And I think it's interesting to show these sort of like new processes.
Yeah, and there's a lot of trial and error with this technique, and unfortunately, a lot of failure that comes with it. So it was kind of, you get maybe 3 or 4 prints from your drawing.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's kind of like you're monotyping at the same time. Like, is it all gonna print? Am I gonna get it? But this just came out so successful. I feel like you can really like feel the texture just looking at it. I think it's a really successful example of a Mocha-Lido.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Phyllis. How are you?
Hey, Erica. The show is so beautiful. What an honor.
Oh, thank you. There's actually someone once, I don't know if you were here in the beginning. No. I'm not. Okay. So some of the students at Kent are actually writing about the show. I met with them the other day, and someone has chosen, I believe it was this piece.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And so I told them how you print on a litho press, and you know, gave a little bit of information about how you're always kind of building these, like it kind of becomes like these architectural landscapes. But that's about as much as I had. So if there's anything you want to talk about this specific piece, in particular.
Wow. Well, I have not been to Deir ez-Zor. It's a city in Syria that was really known for the name itself. It means monastery, and I just find that such in contrast to what's going on in Syria. And also found in the New York Times that they kept, I saw the same photograph and it had 3 different cities names of Syria, and it was exactly the same photograph. So I was like, it's just, to me, I don't know, that story with the pictures I found really wild, plus the New York Times. And this was the city. Anyway, so that's where I got the subject matter from. But the process it's pretty just messy, I can say. And I feel very guilty when I hear about non-toxic, because I feel so married to toxic, I have to say. I'm sorry. But I am using a lot of watercolors on older prints. So I love what happens when the chemicals mix and get very unpredictable. That's something I use a lot in the process. But what an honor that the students are interested in it. I think it's great that it's being used as an educational. I mean, I know it's in an educational institution, but that the students are actually engaging with it is a credit to you, Erica.
Oh, actually, it's a credit to all you guys. I mean, I might have said, yeah, let's put you all together, but the artwork, the show wouldn't be here without all the artists. I mean, your work, all of your work is just so amazing. And you know, you're all doing something unique and different and utilizing the process in a very specific way. And I think they're all amazing examples. Before I get too far, Meryl, I didn't forget about you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I was like, oh, wait, I'm trying to see everyone on the screen.
I know.
But Meryl, someone was asking about one of your prints, and I think they were interested in, you know, like the subject matter and this like fence that you put. And I kind of mentioned, I was like, you know, this fence could have really been like a bad mistake, right? Putting this whole pattern over the front. I'm like, but the way you handled it, it works, and it actually is inviting. Like you see that and you're like, oh, that's interesting. I feel like it draws you in. feel like that would have been a scary choice for me. So I don't know, anything you want to talk about your process or?
Yeah, so this is actually the third time I've printed the top plate, like the key plate, I guess, per se. And it's cool because each time I print it, I do completely different kind of colors and background layers. So every time it turns out it has a completely different feel to it. But the fence came from a couple of things. I really love pattern, and most of the work that I do, whether it's more like abstract or representational, incorporates pattern in some way. And then when I first actually moved to Akron, you're looking around at your new surroundings and everything, and all these vines growing on fences really kind of caught my eye. And it's something that I kind of explored before. And at the same time, I was also kind of coming off of a bad breakup. And so I was thinking about relationships and the fact this kind of like metaphor of a chain link fence, something that is a barrier and it's an effective barrier, but you can see through it, you can see to the other side. And so this like kind of communication or lack of communication, lack of coming together, keeping people apart or something kind of is what brought on using the fence in this like current series. And then I was thinking of like kind of those hands grabbing onto the fence, or even just when people lean on fences and, or like as they walk by and kind of like run their fingers along and stuff. So.
Ooh, I love that. That's so interesting. And I love how you got the background of this. It's like, what is that yellow?
The yellow is another wood block. So
oh, it's a wood block.
Yeah, I use the same swirl. That same block is in the other print with the figure. So I have this wood block that's like 5 feet long that just has this painted swirl that I carved out. Wow. And I just use that swirl kind of over and over, and I just hand print it into backgrounds. And I use a lot of transparency in my ink. And so with the yellow had a little bit of white in it, which makes it very opaque. And so I could print it on the bottom and then print more transparent layers on top of it, and it'll still kind of show through and give some kind of really cool effects.
Yeah, so good. Did you go to school for printmaking?
Yes, I went to grad school for printmaking, and I technically went to undergrad for sculpture, but that's where I learned how to carve woodcut, and I was really drawn to that physical kind of nature of it. And I like to work larger, and like every mark has that like muscle, that meditative physicality to it.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting. I love your metaphor for the fence. So interesting. Thank you so much. I just want to thank everyone again for being a part of this, because I think it just turned out to be such an amazing show. As you guys heard, I think if you popped in late, maybe not, Jack was saying that they're just getting just rave reviews about the exhibition, and it makes me feel really good that I didn't go the theme route and kind of stuck with my gut and just was like, I'm picking people who, when I was asked to do this, it was like all of your names were just like popping into my head. I'm like writing on a piece of paper, like, oh yeah, because for whatever reason, your work has stood out to me. Over the last few years of just really working in the print field, it's like your names are just, coming to my head. I'm like, oh, that person, and, thinking about like all the different reasons why, and, showing diversity. And I think it just came together so well. And I hope you all saw the review. I'm still just like over the moon about it. And it's really all of you, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the artists. So thank you guys so much. I know we've been on this call for a bit. Thank you for all for talking about your work. If you guys have any questions for me, or if someone wants to say something we didn't get to, please, by all means, the floor is yours.
I just want to say this is really a beautiful show, and I'm so honored to be part of it. And thank you for thinking of me, Erica. And the thing about you, Erica, is that your enthusiasm is so contagious. I mean, you're just so like authentically interested in all our work, and you know, I really, really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I really honestly am. I mean, I kind of approach this differently. I didn't really think I was, but you know, I'm also an artist, and a lot of times curators aren't also artists. So I'm, you know, I guess I'm thinking about it from the artist perspective as well, and thinking about, obviously I know printmaking, I have the background as a printmaker, and thinking about process. So I think that maybe shows like why I wanted to show so many different types of prints and artists and, you know, backgrounds. And you know, there's so many conversations that could be had. Like this could be, you guys, we could do this for a year. We could have so many conversations that, you know, I hope you'll all join me on the next, whatever next show I do, that you'll be, you know, you'll be there to, right? I got all your phone numbers. And you guys all have you know, you have so much more work to show. But again, thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time being here. I know it's been a long night. Go have some wine and celebrate. You guys have all done amazing, and I love you all.
So you. Cheers. Thank you so much.